Hello, and welcome to the YSU Jazz Alumni Spotlight On series. This is the premiere edition. My name is Bill Bodine, and I've been accused of being one of the founding fathers of the YSU Jazz program, along with Phil Wilson. And of course, we immediately recruited Tony Leonardi for our big band because we had no idea what we were doing, truth be told. Now I'm hanging with Eric Dregney and Jim Wopola, and we're trying to organize the YSU Jazz alums. And this idea came about after, in 2018, I produced a concert with YSU that featured Sean Jones and Ralph Lalama and Jim Weidman and Daryl Pellegrini and Phil Palumbi. And it was music was killing. And it was a great day. And part of the reason it was a great day is because we're hanging around with our fellow jazz alums. I mean, we have so much in common that everyone had a great time. So we thought, well, maybe we should try to organize this band of banditos. And so that's what we're trying to do. This is one of the projects we've decided we'll come up with for this. This video, it's going to be the first of a Spotlight On series that'll put us in touch with some of our fellow jazz alums. Think of this as like you're at a reunion and these people come and sit at your table and you say, hey, what have you been doing? And then they tell you. All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to hear what they've been doing. And I've watched these videos and they're really interesting. So I think you're going to enjoy this. We're also going to create a space for these. It's not just watching them tonight. We're going to create a space on the Cliff College of Creative Arts website, and we'll store them up there so you can look at them later, or some other time. So that's the project. Tonight we're going to start the series with a visit with Dave Lalama. Dave Lalama is the much younger brother of Ralph Lalama. He's a brilliant keyboard player, really brilliant arranger, and he's an educator extraordinaire. In the coming weeks, you're going to see, we've got Glenn Wilson's going to do one, who was on Woody's band, and he was also with Bruce Hornsby. We're going to do it with Dave D'Angelo, who was sentenced to time on Buddy Rich's band. We're trying to get Jim Masters to do one, Dave Perico, Mike Kamath. So we're trying to, if we can track these guys down, we'll get them to do one of these, okay? And we'll just start building that archive. If you have an idea of someone we should talk to, then would you communicate with us through the Facebook page we have on Facebook? It's a YSU Jazz Alumni Facebook page, okay? Let's get in touch, let's stay in touch. Maybe we'll have the reunion ourselves and have a good time and put a reunion band together, whatever. We don't know, but tell us what we want to do. We'll do it. So thanks for being here, for watching this. Thank you for your support. And like I said, visit us on the YSU Jazz Alumni Facebook page. And look at the time. Let's go over to Dave Lalama's house. Come on.
Hi, my name is Dave Lalama, and I'm a very proud alum of the Dana School of Music at Youngstown State University. That little section of music I just played is by the great Charlie Parker, and the reason I chose to start off this video presentation with it is this is his centennial, and the tune was taught to me by my old professor from Dana, Tony Leonardi. If it wasn't for Tony and people like Joe Parlink, Dr. Mark Walker, Dr. Robert Hopkins, Ruman Rudnitsky, Ed Largent, Adolphus Helstork, and my peers like my brother Ralph and several others, Glenn Wilson, James Masters, I would not have had the kind of wonderful career I've been blessed with since leaving the Dana School of Music and moving to New York City. I've been asked by Bill Bodine to make this video presentation to give you an idea what happens if you're a pretty good student, you work hard, and you continue to work hard for the rest of your life. I was very blessed to be born into a musical family. My father was a weekend drummer, though he worked in the steel mill. My mother was a trained registered nurse who sang on the radio as a young person and sang for what we call club dates, weddings and things like that in my father's band. That's how they met. And then they had my older brother Ralph, and my mother decided to stay home after that. But it was a very musical family. It was a very large family. And between all family, food, friends, and certainly football, because we are from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, which is known for its high school football and basketball teams back in the day, in the 70s and 60s and 70s. So after I left, well, here's a couple pictures I think you'll enjoy of my time at YSU. So you could see in those pictures how young we all were back then. The first picture was a rock band that I was still in high school, and you could see my brother with the big old afro on the side there. That was a band called The New Horizon. We're originally from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, as I said, and with growing up in a musical family, there was always a lot of live music everywhere we went. And so from there, we started getting heavily into the jazz, certainly at the Dana School. And you see those pictures where I'm playing a Fender Rhodes piano. And we had a group with Jim Masters on the trombone, my brother on saxophone, and I believe it was Ralph Rich, who was an engineering student, on drums, and a young man by the name of Jeff Toscano on the bass. And we used to play at the pub. And that's the other picture you see with Ralph playing flute and me with my afro and dashiki. And the pub, one of the bartenders was the great actor Ed O'Neill. And so that was a great learning experience. We would do multimedia events, showing slides while we would improvise with him. We did some avant-garde stuff. We did a lot of bebop and funk music. It was a lot of fun. And the bass player in that was Ed Hallahan, who was an art student. I still have his painting in my studio in my home. And it was a wonderful learning experience. And I began to write a lot then. I was a composition major, and I had the unbelievable fortune to study, and he was my mentor, Dr. Mark Walker. And he got me into counterpoint, and I wrote a Pascalian fugue for string quartet, and all kinds of other stuff, some atonal 12-tone music, and experimented a little bit with electronics and stuff like that. But that stuff hadn't even been formalized yet in academia, and neither was jazz. It took Tony Leonardi and other students. We all bonded together to try and get a more jazz presence on campus and certainly in the Dana School. And I do remember doing lectures for Dr. Gould, our musicologist, about modal, contemporary use of modes. And so that kind of began my academic career as far as lecturing and being able to explain concepts that weren't that known at the time to the general music ed population. So that was a great training ground for me. And all my professors, Dr. Helstork, they were always challenging things about jazz and jazz theory and how it related to the European art music syntax. And so it really helped form my entire academic career and my scholarly work to this day. After graduation, I ended up moving to New York City, and for the first year was the Son of Sam year. And if those of you from New York know about that crime spree, the Yankees started to win World Series again. And I lived in a dentist's office with my Fender Rhodes electric piano that you saw the picture of in that YSU time. And it was quite wonderful. I wrote a bunch of tunes, a bunch of arrangements. I ended up arranging for what was then off the books, the Juilliard Jazz Ensemble, led by another dear friend of mine. And he was a friend of Thelonious Monk and would communicate with him. So I'd get these lead sheets basically from Monk's handwriting. And it was another great study for me. I was doing graduate school without knowing it. And so I started my own nonet, my own big band, which had a lot of stars in it at the time. Mel Lewis ended up playing drums for me. We used to rehearse in the basement in Greenwich Village of a pet store. That pet store owner, I don't know how I found this person, but they love jazz. I guess they came to some of the loft gigs I was doing and things like that. And it was quite wonderful, and I was just writing a lot of music. Then I'd go show it to Thad Jones at the Village Vanguard every Monday night. Ironically, my brother's been a part of that band now for over 30 years, and I subbed in that band a lot when I was younger. And it was just a wonderful, that was my graduate school. So at that point, Woody Herman's band was in town, and a lot of those musicians, they had a night off, they would go here local New York, they would go to local New York clubs, and I happened to be playing here with a nonet. And lo and behold, the road manager came in and heard us, and he asked for my number, and that's when I got the call to go out with Woody Herman. I would end up being his musical director for a couple of years, and traveling Europe, all through the United States, and writing a lot of music and getting it played by very good young musicians. So here's a little rendition of some of that stuff from YouTube.
Thank you. Mercy. I'd like now to have you meet my pianist, a young man I'm very proud of. His name is Dave Lalama. And here is another Ellington piece, a beautiful one called I've Got It Bad, and That Ain't Good. Dave Lalama.
Okay, so there you saw two clips which I borrowed from YouTube. They were all posted by a dear late friend of mine, Bob Belden, who was a saxophone player on that band. I was there for almost 2 years, so a lot of musicians, young musicians, had come and gone by then. Joe Lovano was in the original band, and others, Bruce Johnson on the baritone, some great brass players, Birch Johnson, people like that. And also in there you heard the baritone saxophone of Gary Smolian, who's one of the top saxophone players in the world today. And just so many friends from that time. It was, like I said, graduate school for me, and it was a wonderful time. And from there, actually, I met my lovely wife, the beautiful Roxanne Daglian, and I met her in New Jersey because Woody would do a lot of workshops and clinics, especially during the week as we were touring in our country, actually in Europe too. And we would go to different kinds of schools. And that's what got me into lecturing and, again, explaining pretty complex concepts, musical concepts, to young people. And I started meeting a lot of band director types and things like that through that. And to this day, I've been in contact with them. So my pedagogic vocabulary was really being developed at that time at a rather high level. And so after that, I went and took the next arrangement I'm going to play for you. It's based on the song Is You. The song is you, Jerome Kern. And I called it the song Isn't You. And it's all jazzed up and fast and all that, high, fast, and loud, as we like to say. And I wrote it to feature my brother for Buddy Rich's band. At that time, he was in Buddy Rich's band. And so I went to their rehearsal in New York City. I gave it to Buddy, and they rehearsed it with me in the room. And he says, "What are you doing next week?" I said, "Well, I was currently playing at a jazz cabaret with, I think, Helen Forrest or some famous older jazz singer." And he said, "No, you're not. You're going on the road with me." And I had just I had just proposed to my wife, and we were going to get married in July. That was like in January, and I proposed Christmas Eve. And he said, "Well," I said, "Well, I'm getting married in July." And my wife, he says, he tells me, "She doesn't need you to plan your wedding. You'll just get in the way anyway, so you're going to come out with me till then." So I went out for the next 6 months with my dear friend, my best friend, Glenn Drews, who I did meet at the pub. He was playing at one of those Warren, Ohio, Youngstown clubs that featured shows. He was a trumpet player, and they were traveling after he had finished his college degree. So I'd known him since Youngstown in the pub when we were playing every Friday. And whenever he was in town, he'd come and sit in, along with the great saxophone player, Andy Fusco. So they were both in his band. My brother was in his band, and my roommate from college, the great Dave D'Angelo. He was playing alto saxophone. So it was, a family reunion. Glenn Wilson had been in the band, but he wasn't there when I was there. So I said, "Okay, I'll go out." We went to England. My roommate was the great Wayman Reed, who made his reputation with Count Basie. And at the time, he was married to Sarah Vaughan, one of the most important jazz singers ever. And so this whole connection just keeps happening to me. And it's really had to do with everything from Youngstown. All the live music, all the networking, all meeting people, talking with people, communicating through music with people. It was just all, the foundation was everything I got at Dana. Doing all kinds of music, trying to do it at a professional level. It was fantastic. So I went with Buddy, and here's the chart that I had written. enjoyed the song Isn't You. That was a lot of fun on that band because Buddy Rich was a superstar, international superstar, and I was having lunch with him once in Scotland, and Johnny Carson called the restaurant we were in. It was pretty mind-blowing, because at that level, we played Ronnie Scott's for a week in London, and like all the musicians, Ginger Baker from Cream, all the drummers of the world loved Buddy Rich. And he was quite a handful, but because of my brother, he loved my brother. And then as a result, I walked in and he was great to me. And we started playing trio and things like that, playing Royal Festival Hall, Carnegie Hall, etc. It was a big deal, and I was so young. I don't know that I really appreciated how wonderful it is, but in hindsight, I really do. So from there, I come back to New York in my apartment, which was in the Musicians Building on 86th and Broadway, and playing, freelancing, doing my thing. A lot of jazz singers out here in New York, and so I started going back to that and doing quite well and enjoying myself. And that's when I got married, and we got another apartment in Upper Manhattan. But at that point, we started thinking about having a family. And at that point, if you see pictures of that, you'll see my hair starting to get more and more gray, or white as it is today. But that's when we started to think about a family, and I started thinking about teaching more. And then I went to do a workshop in Rochester, New York, with a friend of mine called Dick Lowenthal, who was he taught jazz studies at Jersey City State College in New Jersey. And we started talking about things, and I started giving him my philosophy on pedagogy and art, music, etc. And lo and behold, the next year he got called to run and begin a jazz program at the conservatory known as the Manhattan School of Music. And at that point, him and Justin DiCioccio, who was a very famous New York City public school jazz guy, he did the High School of Music and Art. He started the jazz program in the 60s, and then when it turned into LaGuardia High School, which is your Fame, the movie Fame type of high school, right next to Lincoln Center in New York City. And then the three of us got together and we tried to started a graduate program. Ironically, a lot of my students at the time were my friends because we were the same age. I was about 20, in my mid-20s somewhere. And a lot of them were stars, and a lot of them were stars that were going to be stars. So I ended up teaching there for the next 30 years as what we would call an adjunct. In the conservatory level, I don't even know what the rankings were, but during that time we had our first baby, and her name is Katie. She's now she now has my granddaughter, and she also has another baby on the way at the time of this video. So I'm blessed beyond recognition, and I said, well, maybe my wife was teaching music in elementary school, but we really wanted to be, she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom because we were going to have more children, and we ended up having my son Andrew and my daughter Christina. So we were just kind of working on building a family, which for me is the most important job in the world and the greatest job in the world, with all its ups and downs. So I ended up I went to 3 institutions I was interested in. NYU, the Manhattan School, both of which I was still teaching part-time at, and then Hofstra University called me to interview because I had met the wonderful Herb Deutsch. If you don't know him, he was part of the team with Robert Moog that helped invent the Moog synthesizer. So again, right place, right time. I'm blessed with this networking vibe that I just did it to meet wonderful artists, and it has worked out unbelievable for me. Again, all formulated when I was at Dana. And so Herb talked me into coming in for an interview out in Long Island. And so I went to all 3 after that. They had offered me a position. So I went to the other 2 places and I said, so tell me, can I get a full-time job here with health benefits, the whole 9 yards, etc.? and they all offered me a job. And then my wife is suburban, if you get my drift. And she said, I'd really love to check out this Long Island thing. She started looking for a home here. We found the home that we currently live in, raised our family, and that, you know, for big meals with our grandchildren, the whole beautiful American dream. And I ended up taking the Hofstra job, staying with Manhattan School simultaneously, just one day a week at that point, and being full-time at Hofstra. So with that, I brought a whole wealth of performing experience to Hofstra, and I'm going to show you a couple videos of my Hofstra band making some music. And I would like to preface it by saying they're all liberal arts students. Most of them are music ed, and a lot of them aren't even music majors. So Hofstra is a liberal arts institution, something that I love with all my heart. Going back to my mother, having reading in our home all the time when I was very, very young, going to the library every Friday to get new books. So it was something I always loved, and all three of my children are educated at liberal arts institutions, so I'm a big fan of that as a parent and as a student. So here's a couple things from Hofstra. Thank you.
On the saxophone. Come fly with us away. Down in Lalama land. Oops, sorry, wrong thing. Isn't academic freedom wonderful? I'm a tenured professor here at Hofstra University, been very blessed to work with young artists for over 30 years, and I get to walk on stage with a bottle of Jack. Ain't academic freedom wonderful?
And there you have one of the great international stars in drums, in jazz drumming, Matt Wilson. He literally lives 15 minutes away from our campus. He comes there all the time, whether I want him to or not. And here he is, two drummers with a student drummer trading, student saxophone player. We were just doing some kind of a really simple head chart. But I've always believed in jazz that It's really about the feeling. It's about being able to improvise. It's about being able to think on your feet, but it's also being able to communicate spontaneously. Improvisation is just spontaneous composition in my book, and that's what these young people were doing. This next cut is Pent-Up House by one of my heroes, Sonny Rollins, but it's one of the first things I transcribed at the Dana School of Music was Clifford Brown's Impossible Solo. The first one was Clifford Brown's solo on Vols Hot by Sonny Rollins. And then I attempted Pent-Up House, which you're about to hear my big band arrangement of it. The soli, what that means is that you get the solo of Clifford Brown, you isolate it, then you try to transcribe it. You notate it, you do it by ear, and you write the rhythms and all that. Then I orchestrated it for big band, which is what you'll hear next. Actually, my big band. So there you have Pent-Up House, my arrangement with my big band. And it's ironic, I think, and wonderful that the seeds for all this stuff that I'm playing for you at the professional level were all planted at the Dana School of Music. It was just being very lucky on my part, but also being very focused and hardworking at that time. Because I was playing a lot of shows at a place called Cherry's Top of the Mall, where Joe Parlink was the contractor. He was our percussion teacher at Dana, and he just kept hiring me to accompany all the show business Las Vegas acts. I met the great comedian Rodney Dangerfield, Henny Youngman, and I became friends with David Brenner, if you're old enough to remember that great comedian. And so I just love the idea of communicating and entertaining people, making them laugh and making them feel. So, and music is the most powerful way to do that. I'm convinced of that. And it was because of that Dana stuff. So that Pent-Up House, really, a lot of colleges play that, I find out, because of my own little self-publishing company I have. And because of Finale, I can get it to all, anywhere as PDF files. So it's quite wonderful without having to leave my home here. So next, after that, my professional activity as a quote-unquote jazz pianist, it's always been, my thing is really accompanying, like spontaneous arranging. And so the singers in particular, I've always had wonderful relationships with some of the great ones and some of the crazy ones and some of the more show business oriented singers that, it's more like cabaret stuff and things like that. So I just love people that are very good at what they do. So I never had a problem with a singer in my life on any professional level. So the next video I want to show you is me with the great Dean Johnson, who's a very famous bass player, and my dearest, one of my oldest, dearest friends. He was in my original Ronette, my first year in New York, Adam Nussbaum. He's one of the great drummers in the world, and we got together as a trio to back up a very good old friend of mine, Carol Fredette, who, by the way, Carol was in a relationship when I met her 40 years ago with the great Steve Kuhn. He's one of John Coltrane's original pianists with John as a leader, and he was the one that got replaced by a very young McCoy Tyner. Because Steve Kuhn has perfect pitch. That means he could hear everything. And when Coltrane would start to go outside the tonal centers at that young time, he would, Steve Kuhn would go with him because he could hear what he was doing. So it wasn't that, like he was doing this modal stuff on top of tonal centers for you musicians out there, and Steve would go with him. So that's how he's become a lifelong friend to me too. And that's what I'm talking about, learning and meeting people and asking questions, hearing them play, and then being able to call them up in the middle of the night and ask them what they think about this or that. It's just a wonderful, wonderful education. But I digress. So let me go back to this next video I want to show you. It's with us with Carol Fredette. We're at Iridium. It was sometime in the last decade, I can't remember when. Iridium is the famous jazz club in New York where Les Paul. The great Les Paul played every Monday night till his passing. He was there for a good 20 or 30 years, right off of Broadway there in Midtown Manhattan. So it was kind of hallowed ground, and we played there an awful lot. She did her little gigs, and all kinds of show business people would show up. So I hope you enjoy that. Then right after that, I'm going to bore you with a recent gig I did with some former students of mine. It's called the Tristano Project. Lenny Tristano was a great artist from the 40s and 50s that I never really studied a lot of. So this music was kicking my gluteus maximus. And so there's some nice close-ups of us playing at Birdland sometime within the last few years. I can't remember when. But I hope you enjoy it.
Be so grand at the game, so carefree together that it doesn't seem a shame that you can say your future with me, 'cause you'd be so easy to love. Pittsburgh. Dave.
I'm sorry about all that hand modeling going on in that particular video from Birdland. So finally, I'd like to end this by saying thank you. Thank you to YSU. Thank you to my friends and family. Thank you to Youngstown, the city of Youngstown, and all the live music that was there when I was there, the people there, the food that was there, particularly the Italian restaurants, and to all my peers that I went to school there with that are still lifelong friends to this day, and particularly my professors there. Each one was different, each one was wonderful. I didn't always see eye to eye with every one of them, but I learned a heck of a lot from all of them. And the freedom they gave me to be me and to ask a lot of questions and to answer them with their professional demeanor and certainly their scholarly intellect. It was just a wonderful and inspirational time I spent in that area. So I thank YSU, the Dana School of Music, and certainly the city of Youngstown. I had a blast there. Now, all this jazz stuff I've been talking about, people didn't know, but I was writing songs since I transcribed Jesus Christ Superstar as a junior in high school. I just loved the Great American Songbook. My town, my neighborhood was called West Aliquippa, where I was born, and our most famous person from there is the great Henry Mancini, the great film composer and American composer and songwriter. So I was raised in what I would call good songs. Like Duke Ellington said, there's two kinds of music, good or not good. So I just love doing that. So I'd like to end, I do believe that I've been blessed, as I've said several times here, first from Youngstown on, in particular, with all the people I've met, all the people that have influenced me, the art that surrounds my life, but certainly my family. And my children, my wife have been very, very inspirational to me and very patient as I go into a room thinking I'm going to be there for an hour and it's 5 hours later and I get called, it's time to eat, Dad, that type of thing. So I was very blessed with their patience and their support throughout my life, and I still am to this day. You know nothing till you're playing the Village Vanguard or the Birdland and your kids are there, and now my grandchildren come to the gig. So it's one of the greatest things in the world. Just like when I was with Buddy Rich's band, and my brother and I, and my parents came to see us, we were somewhere near Pittsburgh, and he did like 2 minutes on me and my brother, and they were pretty Johnny Carson-like and Don Rickles-like. And then he started going with my parents, and they had a wonderful time. And then the other time, Woody Herman would do these dances in between things. I think there's Things Ain't What They Used to Be you saw earlier, that arrangement with Woody, and people were dancing. I love those gigs because we would do we would do 4 hours of a whole history of his book. So that was a great learning experience too. Well, I would then, anyway, we were playing one of those, and I told my parents to come to this country club somewhere in Western Pennsylvania on a Monday or something, and they danced every dance. And Woody hung out with them, and these are gifts. I wish them all for you, and no matter what you do in life. It's just a wonderful thing. Prima familia is the way I was raised in my particular tribe. So with that, here's a song I hope you enjoy. A big shout out to Bill Bodine for putting this all together. I greatly, greatly appreciate it, and I'm honored that you asked me. So with that, enjoy an old song I wrote for my children entitled Children's Dreams. Peace. Take care. Bye-bye.
Tell me, where did we lose it? The players, the music, the flock has forgotten its way. Tell me when it got crazy, the picture grows hazy, and still I remember those days. We had buildings colored rocks by the river's end, funny toads on sunny roads beside us. If I took you there, would you ever dare